Not bad. Very much so. Two big Maseches. Good evening. We're ready to get started. Tonight we're going to be learning most of Daf Kufya test, starting about, where are we starting? 2/3 of the way down at the two dots at Kufya test Amud Aleph. And we're going to be going to Kuf Ha Amud Beis, about 1/3 of the way down. And then for tomorrow night, Amir Hashem, for the Siyum, we'll have approximately one Amud worth, 15 minutes of learning. Then we'll have the Siyum. And then Amir Hashem will have a Suda together at Avida's. If you're interested in joining, please let me know as soon as you can. You can text me or call me, and I'm happy to try and connect you. Let's get started. A couple of sugyas for tonight. Last night, we were speaking about some of the monies that Yosef took from Mitzrayim and held on to them in effect. It went from king to king to king, and right now it's currently sitting in Rome. So says the Gemara. There's the machlokas of the Gemara that we're about to read is a dissenting opinion on that, or if it's just another element of the story, but one way or the other, the Gemara opens as follows. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Shalosh matmonios hitmin Yosef in Mitzrayim. He hid 3 different collections of money in Mitzrayim. Achas niskala leKorach. One was revealed to Korach, not a tzaddik. Ve'achad niskala leAntoninus ben Asvirus. One was revealed to Antoninus, with whom Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was close. Ve'achas gnuza letzadikim asilav. This is the treasure map. One has been left untouched for the sake of the righteous. So one of the reasons why the Gemara assumes that it's possible that there's a machlokes here is because which of these monies is being referred to as being in Rome. So not so clear. Either way, the Gemara says that Osher Shamor Leba'alav L'Ra. So what is that pasuk talking about? Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish Zeh Osher Shel Korach. This is referring to Korach. Ve'es Kol Ha'Yikum Asher B'Ragleihem Amar Reb Elazar Zeh Mamono Shel Adam Shema'amidu Al Raglav. This is the money that gets a person literally on their feet, that gets a person going, that gets a person toward their goals. And this pasuk is in relation to Korach as well. This was the money that was the front for the rebellion against Moshe and Aaron. That Korach v'chol adaso, they were of the concern that Moshe and Aaron were taking all of the kavod for themselves, and it was inappropriately so. And that was what their machlokas was all about. And their machlokas was funded by this amount, by this money. Amar of Levi Masui Shalosh Meos Pirados Levanos Hayu Maftechos Beis Ganazav Shel Korach. There were 300 white mules that carried the keys to the Beis Ganazav Shel Korach, to the storehouses of Korach, where all the money was. Kulu Aklidi V'Klipe de Galda, and all of them were keys and locks that were made out of leather. I didn't know you could make keys out of leather. That's what the Gemara says, that they were made out of leather. We see here that there's a mnemonic in the parentheses, 6 lines from the bottom on Kufya Testament Aleph, Diash, Adiash, Kastech or Kashtach, Me'odach, Siman. And basically what's going to be happening here is that there are authors. We'll see that that's going to be the letter, David, and then part of the word that, part of the pasuk that they authored. Says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar of Yonasan, Odecha ki anisani, Amar David. That pasuk that we have in Tehillim was authored by David. Evan Muasu Abonim Hayesel Rosh Pina. Who said that? Amar Yishai. That was stated by Yishai. And Meis Hashem Hayesazos, Amru Echav. Those are the brothers of David. Ze Ayom Asa Hashem. What about that pasuk? That's Amar Shmuel. Shmuel from the Navi. Ana Hashem Hoshiana, Amru Echav. That was said by the brothers of David. Ana Hashem Atzlichana, Amar David. That pasuk was said by David HaMelech. Baruch haba b'shem Hashem. Who said that? Amar Yishai. Berach Nuchem Beis Hashem. Who said that? Amar Shmuel. It was said by Shmuel. Kel Hashem v'yor lanu Amru Kulan. Everyone said, I said that pasuk. Yisruchag ba'avosin Amar Shmuel. Keli Ata ve'odeka Amar David. Elokai Ramameka Amru Kulan. So if you look through those last couple of paragraphs, and we'll see momentarily the importance of those couple of that one paragraph and those couple of psukim, that they were all authored by a host of people, be it David, or be it Yishai, or be it Shmuel, or Echav Shel David, whatever the case may be. Tanan Hasam, very last line of Kufya Testament Aleph, the Mishnah writes, Makom shenohagu lichpol yichpol. Where there is a custom to double the psukim, we say Odcha twice, we say Me'ez Hashem twice, we say all of these psukim twice. Wherever that's the custom, you should do so. Lifshot, yifshot, and where to say so simply, namely to only say it once, then you should do that. Whatever the minhag hamakom is, that's what you should do. Levarech acharav yivarech hakol ki minhag hamadina. And the bracha at the end, Melech mehulal vatish bachot, that we say at the end of Hallel, that is all lefi minhag. This is an interesting discussion because as the Gemara is about to, let's say the next line and then we'll say the interesting discussion. Amar Abaye, second line, Kufya Testament Beis, Amar Abaye, Lo shanu ela la'acharav. When do we say that a bracha is only about a minhag? That's only the bracha at the end of halal. Of mitzvah levarich. But before we start, there is a mitzvah to make the bracha. So there's a big machlokes in regards to Rosh Chodesh. By Rosh Chodesh, it's not a formal commandment to say halal like it is by Pesach. So by Rosh Chodesh, it's only a minhag. And the Gra was of the opinion that you don't make a bracha on a minhag. So my cousin, Isaac Rice, who's makbid on the minhagim of the Gra, he does not make a bracha when he says halal for Rosh Chodesh, because the halal of Rosh Chodesh is only because of a minhag and he's not mevarach on a minhag. So that's what the Gra held. And if anyone's going to follow those shitas, that would in fact be the case. Most Ashkenazi Jews follow the Mishnah Brura, and we do make a bracha on minhagim. So therefore, the halal on Rosh Chodesh, one would make a bracha. However, that doesn't apply here, because here this is not alt minhag that we say the halal on Pesach. We say it because of a formal requirement. So the Gemara is saying that where is it possible that on Pesach there's a custom to not say a bracha? That's only at the close. That's what Abai is saying here. Lo shanu al achra b'valafanav. Third line, everyone agrees that it's mitzvah levarich. It's appropriate to make a bracha. Da Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, kol ha-mitzvos mevarich over mevarich alein over le'asyasan. We know that there is an idea by birchos ha-mitzvah that whenever we are to do a mitzvah, we first make a bracha, and only later do we, in fact, actually do the mitzvah. This is, of course, true by tefillin. We say all the time, you get the tefillin set up, you get the strap closed, but you're not mehadek, you don't tighten it. Then you make the bracha la'niach tefillin, and then you tighten it. That's a kiyum of the mitzvah saseh. So we make the bracha over la'asyasan. We make the bracha first, and then we do the mitzvah later. Every mitzvah in the Torah should be like that. There are a couple of exceptions. When women light candles on Friday nights, there are some mitzvahs for which we don't make brachos. The poskim discuss why by Tashma Shamita, when there's a mitzvah saseh shel Torah, that you're fulfilling the mitzvah of ona or a variety of mitzvahs, puravu, whatever it is, there's a shaila in the poskim as to, there's different answers, I should say, in the poskim as to why it is that there's no bracha. But there's no bracha at all. Not before, not after, doesn't apply. Okay, so that's what the Gemara says here. So asks the Gemara, "My mashma dehai over lishna de'aktumehu." How do we know that within the language of Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel, who says that the language is over la'asyasan? How do we know that over means that it's before the mitzvah? How do we know that that's the case? So it says the Gemara. We're now going to look at a couple of psukim. Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak dichsiv, because the pasuk writes, he went in front of the kushi, so that means in front of. So therefore, over las yasan is before. Abai Amar mehalcha, from a different pasuk, he went before them, and that also would explain the word before. Some say mehalcha vayavor balkan livnehem v'Hashem berosham. Fine. So just different psukim to indicate this, but in fact, this is lamaisa, that when we have an opportunity to do a mitzvah, so then we're supposed to make a bracha beforehand. And again, there are a whole host of exceptions. For example, the bracha of birchos ha-mitzvah is a mitzvah d'oraisa. We don't make a bracha on saying birchos ha-Torah, excuse me. The mitzvah to say birchos ha-Torah. But we don't make the bracha asher kedushanu b'mitzvosav etzivanu al birkas ha-Torah. We don't say that, even though it's a mitzvah d'oraisa. To say the bracha itself, benching also is a mitzvah saseh shel Torah under many circumstances. We don't make a bracha there either. So there are some exceptions. But when we do make a bracha, it's always going to be done this way with the bracha in advance. 10 lines down, Kufya Tes Amud Aleph, almost a third of the way down. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Rebbe Kofil Badvarim. Rebbe was of the opinion that there were certain things in the halal that were doubled. Rabbi Eliezer ben Parta Mosif Badvar. He would add some things to the halal. My Mosif, what is it that Rabbi Eliezer ben Parta added to the halal? Amar Abaye Mosif Lichpol. Me'odcha lemata. He was of the opinion first to add all these psukim from Odcha until the end. He added all the psukim that we started with tonight, the psukim of David and Yishai and Shmuel v'chulei. He added them and doubled them. That's why, because of this shita and this brisa, Rabbi Elazar ben Parta, that's why our halal today, we say Odcha twice. We say all these psukim twice. Ana Hashem, we say them twice. Darash Rabbi Avira was of the opinion. He said the following, but he said it in different names. Zimnan Amar Le Mishmei de Rav. Sometimes he quoted in the name of Rav. Zimnan Amar Le Mishmei de Ravasi, and sometimes he quoted it in the name of Ravasi. What does the pasuk mean by Yigdal Hayel by Yigamel? What does it mean by Yigamal? And that when the child grew up, he was weaned. Answers the Gemara 1/3 of the way down. Asira Kadosh Baruch Hu Laso Suda LeTzadikim B'Yom Shigamal Chasto Lezar Oshel Yitzchak. There's going to be a time where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to help make a Suda for tzaddikim on the day when he does his Gemilus Chasadim for the children of Yitzchak. And afterwards, when this meal is over, the Suda la tzaddikim b'yom she'igamel, then nosno lo la'avram avinu kochel bracha levarich. and they're going to say to Avram, "It's time for you to bench. We want you to lead the benching. You're the patriarch of the family." He says, "I won't bench." So says the Gemara, why won't he bench? He said, "I'm not shaykh to be the one to lead the benching because I had a child, Yishmael." Amar lo Yitzchak. It says to Yitzchak, "Tolu barich." Okay, fine. Avram doesn't want to do it. Seemingly halachically, you're allowed to pass the buck. It's not like if you get a hazmana to a bris, you're really obligated to go. It's a big problem to not. But here, you're allowed to just say no. So it says the Gemara, what about Yitzchak? He says, no, Omer lohen, I can't. I had a child who was a Rasha, and there was nothing I could do about that. Amar lo, they said, finally Yaakov, they said to Yaakov, he had a mita shlema, all of his kids were tzaddikim, tolu varech, and he says, why don't you lead the benching after this Suda? So he says, I can't. Omer lahem, halfway down, Kufiyat Testament base, he said, I can't lead the benching. Eni mevarach shenosasi shtei achayos b'chayehen she'asida Torah la'osra nalai. Wow. At the time when Yaakov got married to Rachel and Leah, there was no Isser because it was pre-Kabbalah Satorah. And all he had to do at that time was to be intuitive about the halachos that he was keeping. And they, according to some Rishonim, that the Avos did keep all of the halachos in the Torah. So that's a shiloh here of what exactly was going on. Nevertheless, he was of the opinion that even though at that time it was mutter, but because in the future it would be problematic for a man to marry two sisters, so therefore he turned down the benching. So fine, so it says the Gemara, Amar lo Moshe, tolu varech, fine, Moshe Rabbeinu, you lead the benching. Omer lehen eini mevarech, shelo zachisi likanis la'eretz Yisrael lo b'chayai v'lo b'mosi. I was never there. I didn't get there while I was living, and I wasn't buried there either. Omer lo Yoshua, fine, let's go down the line. Let's go to Moshe's Talmud Yoshua, 2/3 of the way down, tolu varech. Maybe Yoshua, maybe you should do it. So he says, Omer lahen eni mevarech, shelo zachisi leben. I didn't have male children. D'chsiv Yoshua bin nun beno Yehoshua beno. It only speaks about those two generations, but not the children of Yoshua. He didn't have any boys. Fine. Lastly, Omer lo leDavid tolu varech. They said to David HaMelech, you should bench, and he said, Taka, you're right. Omer lahen ani avarech v'li no levarech shenemar kos yeshuosa sa u'shem Hashem ekra. That David HaMelech would actually, in fact, bench at this meal, the meal of Gemilus Chasadim, the meal that's based on the pasuk of Ve'igdal Hayolad Bigamal, that Asir HaKadosh Baruch Hu to have a Suda for Tzadikim on the day of the Gemilus Chasadim of the Zar Shal Yitzchak, and David HaMelech would bench at that meal. Again, a lot of homilies here. What exactly is this talking about? What's the meal? Is it Yom Shal Mashiach? What's the Gemilus Chasadim by Yitzchak? Why isn't it Yaakov? So there's a lot to spend time on here, but it's a very deep and rich Mari Makomos here. Ayin Sham in the Mari Makomos. Next Mishnah. The Mishnah writes, Ein maftir nachar haPesach afikomen. End of the Mishnah. Very brief. After Ein maftirin, you're not allowed after the Pesach, after the Korban Pesach, to have an afikomen. What is afikomen? We saw a couple of shitas of this earlier, and we're going to learn this yet again. Says the Gemara, 10 lines from the bottom. At the Gemara is open, 3 lines into the wide lines on Kufiyut Testament Beis. My afikomen. When the Mishnah says that Ein maftir nachar Pesach afikomen, that after the Korban Pesach you can't have afikomen, what does it mean? So that's the machlokes in the Amoraim. Amar Rav shelo ya'akru mechabura lechabura, that you can't go from your chabura to another. What would you be eating if you went to another chabura? Meat. You'd be eating more korban pesach. Namely, Rav was of the opinion that when the Mishnah says in maftir pesach afikomen, that after your korban pesach you couldn't go and eat another korban pesach. You couldn't go eat from another chabura. However, Rishmuel Amar Kigon or Dila'eli that goes Laya La'aba. No, it doesn't mean when the Mishnah says in maftir nachar pesach afikomen, it doesn't mean that you can't eat more korban pesach. It means you can't eat other food. So or dilai are mushrooms that he says I like to have a little sautéed mushrooms. That's my favorite. And it goes laya and birds la'aba. Abba was Rav's real name. So that was a reference to Rav. We've seen that throughout Shots a number of times that Abba is a reference to Rav, and according to some, it was actually his name. The Reb Chanina Bar Shila was in the same camp as Shmuel, that it wasn't talking that the afikomen in the Mishnah wasn't talking about the Korban Pesach, but rather talking about food. What did he say it was? Reb Chanina Bar Shila, Reb Yochanan Omar, they said, Kigon, Tmarim Klayos Ve'egozin. Dates and seeds and nuts, and those are the types of things that you're not allowed to eat. So let's look back in the Mishnah. Ein maftir nachar Pesach afikomen. That after you eat your Korban Pesach, according to Rav, it means you can't have more Korban Pesach from another chabura. And according to Shmuel, it basically means you can't have dessert. You can't eat anything else. That should be the last taste that you have in your mouth, is the Korban Pesach. So let's analyze this. Tanya Kavase de Rav Yochanan, we have a brisa that seems to knock out the shita of Rav and follows the camp of Shmuel / Rav Yochanan, namely the dessert model. That when the Mishnah says, Ein maftir achar Pesach afikomen, that the limitation was to eat other food after the Korban Pesach. Now things are a little different because now the last thing we eat is matzah. We'll discuss that today as well. But back in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, that was the diyun, is what could you eat after the Korban Pesach? So it says the Gemara, the Brisa indicates as follows, 7 lines from the bottom of the page, and maftirin achar Pesach, you're not allowed to eat anything after the Korban Pesach. What's the example in the Brisa? Just like Rav Yochanan. Kegon, for example, timarim kelayos ve'egozim, period. That's how the Gemara concludes here, that the halacha is ein maftirin achar Pesach. Afikomen means that after the Korban Pesach, it is not appropriate for one to have other foods, be they timarim, kelayos, egozim, dates, seeds and nuts. That's not, no more. After the Korban Pesach, you should go to sleep with that flavor in your mouth. That is appropriate. Brush your teeth. Don't brush your teeth. Mouthwash. Okay, fine. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi. What? We eat matzah now. The matzah we're going to see tonight is not just a zecher. It's a din doraisa in and of itself, according to Rava, and that's how we paskin will see in tonight's Gemara, black on white. So it's not purely a zecher; it's its own mitzvah doraisa, but seemingly, the last thing that they would have eaten was the Korban Pesach, and you couldn't eat anything else afterwards. So now the Gemara says a little bit more up to date, which is that what do we do nowadays? So that's what the Gemara says, and just a gentle twist in the language. 7 lines from the bottom, we're going to see 2 versions of this, and we're going to see a statement of Shmuel, and then there's going to be 2 or 3 sources. Then we're going to see the reverse of Shmuel's statement and the same 2 or 3 sources that are going to be used as questions and comments. So let's get started. 6 lines from the bottom on Kufya Tes, Amud Beis, and the Gemara says in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel, Ein maftirin achar matzah afikomen. You're not allowed to have, after matzah, you're not allowed to have afikomen. What did we just say afikomen was? Dessert. So the matzah is the last thing you're supposed to have. So our Mishnah spoke about the Korban Pesach, but Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel says, Ein maftirin achar ha matzah afikomen, that after the matzah, you can't eat any dessert. Ask the Gemara, Tanan, hold on 1 second. Let's look back at our Mishnah. Our Mishnah was very short, but it was jam-packed. That's what our Mishnah says right here toward the bottom of Kufya Tes Beis. So if that's true, says the Gemara, the implication from our Mishnah is that the only time when we say ein maftirin, that you're not allowed to eat anything afterwards, that's by a Korban Pesach, but by matzah it should be perfectly fine. So maybe Kasha and Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel, who says that ein maftirin achar matzah afikomen, that should only be true by Pesach. He says that the Gemara implies that it should be mutter to eat something after matzah. So answers the Gemara 4 lines from the bottom, lo mibaya ka'amar. We've seen this many times, and we're going to see it 5 or 6 times right now in a row. Lo mibaya ka'amar means I don't need it for this. I need it for something else. Lo mibaya, I don't even need it. This part's obvious, but I'm here to confirm something else. Lo mibaya ka'amar. What is this Mare Makom that we have here? It says the Gemara, Lo mibaya achar matzah, delo nafish ta'amayu. I don't need you to tell me that after matzah, where there isn't a lot of flavor, matzah is not such a flavorful food. Delo nafish ta'amayu. Aval, maybe I would have thought la'achar Pesach, the nafish ta'amay, the meat, the batzar, it's juicy, it's just roasted, it tastes so good, there's so much flavor. So then, velo matzi avurei, that even if you eat dessert, you're still going to be tasting the Korban Pesach. Maybe we would have said less lanba, that there's no problem with eating dessert after the Korban Pesach, kamash malan, that's not true, that we are concerned. And then the Gemara says, well, maybe I have a Mari Makom to support the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel says that you're not allowed to eat anything after matzah. Says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom. Maybe we can say, Hasufkanin, Behadovshin, Beha'iskaritin. These are 3 different types of matzah. The article translates them as sponge matzah and honey matzah and wafers. They're crackers. They're basically crackers. And the halacha is that you're not allowed to be yotze matzah with them, but they're also not chametz. It's basically Pesach crackers. Maybe egg matzah would be the equivalent of today. And we saw this much earlier in the Maseches as well, that when you take flour and you mix it with shemen and yayin and dvash, so that's not chametz, but it's also not matzah. Good. So also this changes the bracha. It could possibly change the bracha on other levels as well, to say that maybe the bracha is not even hamotzi. That's possible as well. Abrius. Sometimes when you're on an airplane and they say that you're eating mazonos rolls, those mazonos rolls were not made with water. They were made with fruit juice in order to change the bracha. So the bracha would change entirely. The assumption of the Gemara is that when the Brisa says sufkinin, v'haduvshinin, v'ha'iskiritin, that these are things that are edible, they're mutter to eat, but you can't be yotze, the mitzvah saseh, shel matzah. So therefore, the Brisa writes, with these foods, you can eat as much of them as you want. Ubilvad, with one provision. Provided that, that the last thing that you eat is matzah. Oh, so says the Gemara, great. This is a perfect source to support Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel. Says the Gemara, yeah. At the end, that's when you have to eat the matzah, but berishona, to eat the matzah first, and then to eat something else afterwards, lo. That seems like a perfect match to the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel that says you can't eat after the matzah. Only be'achrona, you can only have the matzah at the end. So then says the Gemara, no, that's not correct. Lo mibaya ka'amar, another lo mibaya. Top line of Kufaf Amaral. Lo mibaya berishona de ka'achel te'avon. I don't need you to tell me that it's mutter to eat this, to eat the actual matzah first, because there you're eating b'te'avon. Aval be'achrona, I might have thought that if you were eating the matzah after all of the crackers, dilma asi l'mechal achila gasa, maybe you're not eating the matzah the right way. You're eating it be'achila gasa. You stuffed your face with the honey crackers and with the sponge crackers, but you're full. You're yotze the matzah then, are you going to be yotze? Says the Gemara, yes, you are. Emalo, I might have thought you were not yotze, kamash malan that you are. So then says the Gemara, that was all version 1 of Rabbi Yehuda Mar Shmuel, who says that you're not allowed to eat anything after matzah. However, here is version number 2. Mar Zutra Masni Hachi. He learned Shmuel totally differently. What did he say? Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Maftirin achar hamatzah afikomen. We just said on the bottom of the previous Amud, Ein maftirin achar hamatzah afikomen, that you cannot eat afterwards. Says the Gemara here, the exact opposite. Yeah, you're allowed to eat after matzah. And then all the sources that we just used to ask or to try and prove about the previous Shmuel, on version number 1 of Shmuel, we're now going to reverse their effect here. So the first one was a question. Now it's Nema Misayele, 6 lines down. Kuf Chaf Amar Aleph, excuse me. Nema Misayele, maybe we should say that our Mishnah is a raya to version number 2 of Shmuel, who says that you are allowed to eat after eating matzah. You're allowed to eat dessert. Nema Misayele, says the Gemara. Our Mishnah writes on the bottom of Kufiyat Testament, that one is not allowed to eat anything after a Korban Pesach. Achar Pesach hu delo achal. But achar matzah maftirin. So maybe we would have thought that our Mishnah is a perfect raya for version number 2 of Shmuel, that it's mutter to eat after matzah. Says the Gemara, lo mibaya. Nope, not a proof. You can't bring a proof from there because, as we saw on the bottom of the previous page, it's just teaching me a lo mibaya. What's the lo mibaya ka'amar? Lo mibaya achar matzah de lo nafish taimei. I know that after matzah, it would be one status if it was nafish taimei, because there's not a lot of flavor there. Because there's so much flavor after Pesach, that's not the case. So our Mishnah can't be a support to this second version of Shmuel one way or the other. Meisive, let's ask a question. We tried to bring this as a support before. Now we're asking it as a question. Meisive, against the second version of Shmuel, these types of crackers that, again, they were not chametz, they're mutter to eat, but you cannot be yote the mitzvah of matzah. So then the Gemara says, if you're allowed to eat the chametz at the end, what's implied? It implies that you're only allowed to eat afterwards, but not before. So that should be a kasha on approach number 2 of Shmuel, who says that you're allowed to eat. Here it seems that you're only allowed to eat the matzah at the end and not at the beginning. So it says the Gemara for the 5th time, 6th time, lo mibaya kamar. It's just coming to teach a separate halacha. Lo mibaya berishona de ka'achel lete'avon. And we know, of course, that it's mutter to eat the matzah in the beginning before you stuff your face with all the crackers. That's mutter because you're eating lete'avon. Aval, maybe I would have thought that I might have thought you were not yotze if you eat it at the end. Kamash malan. That's where this then came in to say that is the case. So these are the 2 versions of Shmuel. Do we say ein maftir nachar hamatzah afikomen, that you're not allowed to eat anything after the matzah? Or the second version is yes, you are allowed to. Or this one's ein. Yeah, ein maftir nachar hamatzah afikomen. Or the second one is maftir. So we paskin halacha l'maisa that you're not supposed to eat after the matzah. That should be the last thing that you eat for that night. That brings us to the 2 dots, more than 1/3 of the way down, almost halfway down on Kuf Chaf Amud Aleph. We're going to do another Amud or so, and then we'll stop, and then we'll have the Nir Session the same tomorrow night. Let's continue. Amar Rava.
Excited.
What?
You're more excited.
I'm very excited.
You got a little work.
I am. I'm really excited. I can't wait. I'm so excited.
A little motivation.
It's also Michael Peter's birthday tomorrow, right. So we're gonna have a celebration, a double celebration. Amar Rava, matzah bizman hazeh deoraisa. As you can see, there are little letters and dots all over the place here to indicate that we paskin like Rava. The Rambam quotes this la'alacha. This is in Shulchan Aruch as well. So that's, I think, I don't know if it's exactly the same language, but it is quoted in the Rambam this way. So Rava says, Matzah bizman hazeh de'oraisa, umaror derabanan. So the Gemara is very bothered by that. Once the Korban Pesach is out of the picture, how is it that you got to matzah being de'oraisa and maror being derabanan? What was the method to the madness? So it says the Gemara as follows: Umayshna maror. Why? Why is maror any different? How is it, Rava, that you concluded that matzah is still de'oraisa while maror is derabanan? After all, the pasuk says al matzos umrorim. It says that the Korban Pesach was eaten with both of them. So how do you come along and distinguish between the two? Bisman de'ika Pesach yishmar, bisman de'leka Pesach lekamar. Matzanami, aksiva matzos umrorim. They're both in the same exact pasuk. So why would you assume that matzah and maror, Rava, have different dinim? Why would you assume that maror is reduced to a rabbinic law while matzah is still biblical? So says the Gemara, Matzah mehader hadar bekra. That the reason why is because we have another pasuk. What's the next pasuk? The pasuk is be'erev tochlu. Be'erev tochlu matzah. That on that night you're supposed to eat matzah. So Rava says because we don't have a separate pasuk to indicate that maror should be d'oraisa. So therefore, yes, you're correct. It would have been a natural assumption that with the removal of the Beis Hamikdash and there's no more Korban Pesach, fine, everything should be derabanan. Therefore, maror is derabanan. But we have another pasuk called. That says here in the Gemara, Be'erev tochlu matzos, that even implies that even when there is no Beis Hamikdash and there is no Korban Pesach, that still there's a din d'oraisa to eat matzah. So it says the Gemara, well, that's great that that's Rava's approach, but not all the Amoraim agreed with him. The Rav Acha, halfway down on Kuf Chaf Amud Aleph, the Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar, Echad Zeh ve'echad Zeh derabanan. I disagree with you. Both matzah and maror, both of them are derabanan. Ella, what are you going to do, Rav Acha bar Yaakov, with the pasuk? Haksi be'erev tochlu matzos. What do you do with the pasuk with which Rava re-engaged and said matzah taka is deoraisa? He says no. There we say that's different. That's in a time when there is a Beis Hamikdash and there is a Korban Pesach, but the person is a tamei or they're b'derech rechoka and they're far away. So there, under those circumstances, the sal kadaita chamina. I might have thought, again, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, the person's just a tamei or he's stuck on a boat somewhere. I might have thought the sal kadaita chamina cave in the Pesach lo achle matzo mor nami lo nechal. According to Rabbi bar Yaakov, that pasuk was needed to teach me that if a person's a tamei or b'derech rechoka and therefore they can't bring the Korban Pesach, I might have thought havamina that these two things matzah mor nami lo nechal kamash malon that you're obligated to eat them. So that means that Rav Acha bar Yaakov holds that in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, when a person did not bring the Korban Pesach, they had a chiyuv d'oraisa for both matzah and maror. However, outside of the time of the Beis Hamikdash, Rav Acha bar Yaakov held that both were derabanan. So it's an all or nothing picture for him. He holds that matzah and maror are two peas in a pod. During the times of the Beis Hamikdash, if you're a tamei or shai b'derech rechoka, but you couldn't bring, and therefore you couldn't bring the Korban Pesach, fine. So the halacha is that you're still chayiv midoraisa because that's what the pasuk means when it says be'erev tochlu matzos. However, outside of the Beis Hamikdash, outside of the times of the Beis Hamikdash, when you're not bringing a Korban Pesach, they both be derabanan. The Rava, what are you going to do about the tamei v'shai b'derech rechoka? If that's how Rav Acha bar Yaakov uses the pasuk to teach us about the tamei and shai b'derech rechoka, what are you going to do, Rava? Rava, 2/3 of the way down, Kuf Chaf Amud Aleph, Amar Lach, he'll say to you, tamei v'shai b'derech rechoka, lo tzarech kra, delo gari mi arel uven nechar. They're not any worse than an arel and a ben nechar, and thereby an arel and ben nechar by a person who is who's an arel and they're or someone who's converting. So the Tanya kol arel lo yochal bo eno ochel aval ochel b'matzo maror. We already have a brayso to indicate that during the times of the Beis Hamikdash that you're going to be chayiv. So the Gemara is equating someone who's tamei v'hai b'derech or v'hai b'derech rechoka, someone who was tamei and therefore they couldn't bring the Korban Pesach, or they were far away and couldn't bring it, to an arel. And there the brayso says by an arel, black on white, without trying very hard, the brayso says that they're chayiv and matzah midoraisa. V'idach, Rav Acha bar Yaakov, how do you respond to this? He has a great brayso. Rava is using the brayso of the arel to say that there's no difference between an arel and the tamei v'shai b'derech rechoka, and therefore the pasuk's left over. The pasuk of be'erev tochlu matzos is available for me to use to teach me that matzah bizman hazeh is going to be d'oraisa. The idach, how does Rav Acha bar Yaakov answer that? 12 lines from the bottom or so, 3/4 of the way down. Ksiv b'hai. We actually do have explicit psukim in both cases. We have extra words all over the place for this. V'tzriche, and strangely, the Gemara says v'tzriche. We need both, but the Gemara does not detail what the tzrichusa is. we could come up with svaras lakan ulakan. I believe earlier in the Masechta we saw them. An orel has its own world of halachos. Maybe that's solvable, and maybe we would have therefore thought that that's different than the tamei v'shav derech hachoka that's not solvable. Okay, so there's svaras lakan. So take a look at Rashi and the Rashbam here. Tanya Kavase the Rava, the Brisa supports the sheet of Rava. What did Rava hold? That matzah bisman hazez deoraisa. Let's see what the Brisa has to say. 6 days we eat matzah, and on the 7th day is that Tzeres Lashem Elokecha. It's a day for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mashvi rishus af sheishes yamim rishus. Just like the 7th day is permissible to eat matzah, af sheishes yamim rishus. So too by the 6 days it's a rishus. So says the Gemara, my time. Why did the Brisa separate out? Why did the Torah separate out the 7th day from the 6th day? And here we're going to be using one of the Yud Gimel Midos Shator Nidrashas Bahin, one of the 13 hermeneutical principles that help us to get a glimpse, one of the lenses with which we need to look at the Torah. And answers the Gemara, Have davar shahed bichlal. It was something that would have been included, v'yatza min haklal alamed, and it was excluded. It was taught separately, explicated on its own. Shvi was separate of the first 6 days to teach us something unique. Lo lelamed al atmo yatza, but the 7th day wasn't separated from the pack, from the other 6 days, to teach me something about itself, but to teach me something in general, not only about the 7th day. Yachol, what might I have thought? Yachol af laila rishon rishus. I might have thought that maybe even the first night was a rishus. Talmud lomar amata tumrim yochluhu einli el bizman shebeis hamikdash kayim. Bizman shein beis hamikdash kayim minayin. Talmud lomar be'erev tochlu matzos hakasav kiva'o chova. Period. End of the Gemara up until the Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Chaf Amud Aleph. And what does the Gemara clearly conclude? The Gemara clearly concludes like Rava. The Gemara quoted a machlokas between Rava and Ravacha Bar Yaakov and machlokos as to how to understand the Pesukim. The Gemara brings a brisa according to the shita of Rava that it's a mitzvah to say to eat matzah nowadays. And the Gemara very clearly at the end, with no hemming and hawing, says Talmud Lomar be'erev tochlu matzos hakasu kiva'u chova. The Torah explicated these particular words of Erev Tochlu Matzos so that we would know that Afal Pi, that there is no Beis HaMikdash, unfortunately. So still, we have a mitzvah Sasei Shel Torah, so we should not feel any like maybe it's Derabanan. It's not Derabanan. That's what Rava is saying here, and the Rambam quotes as La Halacha. That brings us to the next Mishnah, on the very bottom line of Kufchaf Amud Aleph. What if a person falls asleep during the Pesach Seder? That's a problem. Well, really, it's really more of a question of what if they fall asleep during the Korban Pesach. It's a little bit different. So Yashnu, Yashnu Miksasan, if a few people fell asleep, so then Yochlu Kulan. What? Yochlu. What'd you say? Oh, okay. So if a person was sleeping, Yashnu Miksasan, if a few people were sleeping Yochlu, they can continue eating. Kulan, if everybody fell asleep, Lo Yochlu, then you're not allowed to eat. However, that's the Tanakam. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Nisnam Nimu, if a person's just nodding off, Yochlu. Near Nimu, if you really black out, so then Lo Yochlu, then you should not be eating. Lastly, HaPesach Achar Chatzos, Metame Es Hayodayim. Eating the Korban Pesach after Chatzos HaLaila is Metame your hands. That's a din derabbanan, that it makes your hands Tameh. Pigul v'hanosar metamin hayadayim, and as well pigul and nosar. Pigul is food with which you had machshava that you should not have had, either about the makom or the zman, about the animal during the korban. V'hanosar, food that reaches its expiration date, halachic expiration date, metamin hayadayim. So opens the Gemara. We'll learn about 7 more lines till the 2 dots, and then we'll stop for the night. Says the Gemara as follows. Rabbi Yossi Omer, it says in our Gemara, in our Mishnah, and it's quoted here again, Rabbi Yossi Omer, nisnam nemu yochlu, nir demu lo yochlu. If you're nodding off, you can eat. If you're really sleeping, you can't. Heichidame nisnam. How do we define nodding off? We're very good at it. How do we define it? So it says the Gemara, Amar Avashi, nim velo nim, you're sleeping, but you're not sleeping. Tir velo tir, you're awake, but you're really not awake. Okay, that's not helpful. We still don't know what that means. So then the Gemara gives a little bit more of a presentation as to what it means to be sleepy. The Kari Leva Ani, if they call your name and you say, yeah, I'm here, but velo yada la hadure svara, but you have no idea what was going on in the conversation. Like as you wake up, you're just coming to say, sorry, I have no idea what you were talking about. But I could hear you and I woke up. But when you're reminded of what was talked about, then you will remember. Does this mean before you fell asleep? Does this mean while you were sleeping? What level of consciousness is this? I'm not familiar. I don't know if I have the Nisnam name thing going on. I'm either out cold or I'm awake. The fact that you hear your name, what if you're a light sleeper? Always. So then are you never in this category of nirdim? Okay. Abaye have a Yosef Kame de Rabba. It should make you feel better if you fall asleep at the Pesach Seder, because Abaye was sitting with Rabba, and Rabba, Plaza, to come namname. Abaye saw that Rabba had fallen asleep at the table. Remember that Rabba was kind of like he kind of like took Abaye under his wings because Abaye was an orphan. Amarle meinam kanai mar. Seems to me that you were falling asleep, Rabba. I just want to make sure that you're still doing good. Amarle minu me kam minamne. It's not. I only fell asleep. I was only nodding off. It's not. In our Mishnah writes nisnab nemu yochelu nir demu lo yochelu. And the distinction that our Mishnah made, like Rabbi Yossi, is that if you just are nodding off, that's okay. It's just if you black out, that is a problem. We'll learn the last Amud Kufchaf Beis tomorrow night, Emir Tashem, at Avida. We'll be starting Daf Yomi on time at 8:40 on Zoom and in person. And looking forward to celebrating with you all tomorrow night. Shatova, Mazel Tov, very exciting. Looking forward, and we'll hopefully celebrate a more informed Pesach after learning the Masechta just prior to Pesach.
The problem is everyone falls asleep, you wake up.
Listen, I'm in it for a while.
No, the problem. I don't know what the problem was with Rabba. That's a good question. It was post. But the Mishnah was dealing with the Korban Pesach, and the Rishonim point out that if you were to have fallen asleep at Chabura and you woke up, it's as if you're in another makom, and you can't eat the Korban Pesach in Shtei Makomos. When you wake up, it's a new location, as it were. So that's what some of the Rishonim say. Have a beautiful night, everybody.